coming on the show. Great to meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays through Zoom. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself
Yes,
and your organization and what you're passionate about?
sure. So my name is Mary Hendra, and I am both a mission-driven executive and an entrepreneur. So I have worked for many years, really at the intersection of education, businesses for social good, um, in civic engagement. I am passionate about making better communities, both inside work and outside, because I think we need each one of us to
Hmm.
be part of that. And in my business, I lead cohorts of both, again, within companies and separately for individuals, to really tap into a greater sense of stillness, creativity, and community. And I do that because I believe that helps each of us show up as our best self, to be more innovative and curious, to be more engaged in the world. It's not a retreat from, but it's an engaging with the world that lets us bring more creativity and curiosity to the world's greatest issues.
Amazing. That's great. So what kind of what kind of things do you talk about when you talk about expanding these sorts of communities, or what kind of sort strategies do you use?
So I use a lot of creative strategies, some things that maybe people don't always think about as being part of their toolbook. We sometimes use paint. We sometimes use the paint brushes in
It's
inauthentic or
design
not.
thinking. It's design
Yeah, yeah,
thinking.
we use things in very different ways than they may have been intended. We rip up paper. We ask each other really interesting questions, and so building in that curiosity for others. We lean in with empathy, so we're building empathy and creating with empathy, which is design thinking as
Mhm.
well, right? How do we really understand what somebody is going through when we're thinking about how we solve for their problems? Mm, and it's also part of really effective teamwork, right? Because if you don't feel like you can authentically show up as yourself, if you don't feel like your ideas will be valued or even heard, then you're not going to bring the creativity that we need in the world.
Right. Well, so how do you create those kind of safe spaces where people are free to communicate? Because a lot of times when we come into groups, especially with power structures and things like that, people are like very reticent about saying things that they think their boss might not like or the organization might not like. I
Yes.
mean, I remember being at a session once where we were brainstorming, and one of the managers said the only solution is to get rid of all middle management. All middle management has to go. And I'm like, okay, this guy was not afraid to say that, but how do you get people to
Yeah.
be safer in those kind of sessions?
Yeah. So I think of two different stories. So one is when I'm a manager, it's about building the space, being conscious of your own power dynamic, right?
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, I don't think of myself as having power, except that if I'm in a role where I am the manager, I'm the leader, I do have power. I have power explicitly and implicitly. And so what I had to learn is that from there, I need to really understand each person and what they need for a learning environment. And that's something that you can start on day one when a person is hired, or even, day -10 when you decide to hire them, asking questions about what kind of environment it allows you to learn and to thrive, because those are the conditions that need to be present for them to contribute, to a team environment. And it is different for each person. So as a manager, it's really important to understand your people, understand what environments they need. In some cases, it meant patience, because the person needed to see over time how I responded to other people's ideas. And that's fair, right? To see, like, am I really going to be valued? She says I'm valued, but how does she respond? And that may take some time. For some people, it means being able to contribute on day one. So in that first day, there was one team where I was fortunate to be able to bring together a team where I had hired 3 new people in quick succession, and 2 of them started on exactly the same day. One started a week later. So as soon as all 3 were on board, we had a gathering, and part of it, they all contributed. What questions did they have for each other? How did they want to learn about each other? Now, some of them chose to go deep, right? When is the last time that you tried to change something really important to you?
Mhm.
And some of them were like, what's the TV show that you like watching? You know?
Small
And
talk
both
versus
are,
big talk, right?
yeah, both are okay, because both were things that somebody in the room needed to know. And I had shifted the power dynamic by saying the first thing we're going to do is one of us is going to write down these questions. We're going to fold them up on a piece of paper, put them into like a fishbowl, and then we're going to just draw some out and start talking. And we used that fishbowl for a few months because there were so many questions people had that we started every meeting with 1 or 2 questions. And it again had shifted the power dynamic. It wasn't their boss asking, so what book are you reading right now? Which might seem like an interview question. It was their colleague saying, what book are you reading?
Mhm.
Where it became a different kind of power dynamic.
Yeah.
Now, when
And if you
I'm going
disconnect it from yourself and make it the fishbowl, you can blame the fishbowl if it gives you a bad question, right? Damn
And
you.
every once in a while we'd get a question and we'd all laugh and be like, well, that question's no longer relevant. Okay. We can do it. And we could put more questions in, right? Um, so little things like that where you're building an understanding of each other, but you're also giving voice for everybody in the room to have equal power as they're entering those conversations. That's the start.
Yeah.
When I go in and am doing a session where I may only have people for an hour or 90 minutes, or if I'm lucky, I get a full day with people. I still have to remember that I need to build into that, and that I'm walking into an environment where I don't necessarily know all the power dynamics and the personality issues and the conflicts and the history that has happened before I got there.
Yeah. You
So we
notice that it
start.
always takes time to get things
Mhm.
rolling because everyone's just still stuck in their pre-meeting mindset wherever they happen to be. So you've
Yeah.
got to sort of coax everybody into a
Yeah.
completely different space before you start
Yeah.
getting useful things out of them.
Absolutely. And remembering that it still starts with small steps and that there is a transition moment. And sometimes I'll call that moment out explicitly. As you said, there's all the things that have been left be or that they are bringing in with them that I want them to leave outside. And there's a great story called The Worry Tree that sometimes I'll use in transition where I'll read it and just let people settle into a moment listening to this story. And the story is one of somebody who is transitioning from a bad day at work to home with their family.
Mhm.
And you may have heard it before that
I
it
haven't.
goes
It
around in
sounds
different
interesting.
iterations. Yeah. So the person on the way into the office, into their home, they touch a tree, and their boss is with them at the time, which is interesting, and sees them just touch this tree, kind of, I imagine them kind of closing their eyes. And then they go in to their home and they are all smiles and they greet their spouse and their children with love. And they have this beautiful dinner together. And on the way out, the boss says, I have to ask, what is that tree? Because you transformed in that moment, right? And the person says, it's my worry tree. I hang my worries up on the tree when I get home because they don't belong here at home. And when
Mm.
I come out in the morning, I can pick them up on my way to work, but I often find that I just don't have as many in the morning, right? To
Wow.
pick
It's
that
almost like a
up at the
low-tech
tree.
version of that show Severance where people's brains are cut in half and like they have a work side and a home side.
It is. And
Great
and
idea.
even though it's like a transition from work to home, I find that it works in sessions as well because it calls attention to this is a moment that we're creating together. What can we leave outside? We can pick it back up in an hour if we need to, but what can we leave outside? What do we want to bring into this space to create a space of curiosity, of creativity, of innovation, of building together something that we have to have that space to imagine together.
Yeah, that's really interesting because if you think about it, I mean, we've kind of lost those transitional spaces now that we're no longer commuting, right? I
Right.
mean, how do we transition? We have to build our own transitions, even if they're short transitions like that one. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going on the phone now. Let me transition to work
Yeah.
as opposed to play. So it must be really, it's much more difficult now to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and since you said like transition to work from play, I just have to jump in because, because one of the things that we increasingly are learning and that there's research and study about is that play and work are not quite the dichotomy and the binary that we think they are.
Hmm.
And when we can bring a playful mindset to work, it increases our performance, it increases our social and emotional well-being, and it increases our ability as a leader to actually build the authentic relationships. So playfulness is often part of my sessions as well,
Yeah.
because that's what we need is a little bit of play in order to tackle the really serious issues of our day.
Oh, exactly. But the problem is, how do you work with some of these organizations that are like, oh, we can't have any fun here. This is serious work, right? Where banks or
Mhm.
where insurance companies
Yeah.
or where something, it's like I think those organizations need play more than anyone, really, in some cases.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. And I think that's part of the challenge, right? Is we have this mindset that work must be serious. And I mean, let's be real, we have a world that has some really serious issues, right? So
Hmm.
we're dealing with climate change. We're working through issues of social and racial justice, right? These are big issues. And it can be really tempting to think we need to just be serious all the time in order to reference them, or to really make progress. And they are serious issues. What I would say is that we we don't bring our best self if we keep ourselves in those moments of tension and stress, anxiety, of this notion of seriousness.
Hmm.
That when we are most creative tends to be when we feel a little bit lower stakes, right? A little bit lower stakes, like it
Yeah.
will be okay to fail, because that's how we learn and that's how we are able to be more innovative, is when we can try things. And so if we can create some of the boundaries within which we can work, but then give ourselves the space to play a little bit, to think of it as a problem that we can solve, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But I
That
find
will
that,
make a difference.
well, I've noticed that we do have a lot of big problems, but people don't want to tackle them for some reason. They're fine with these little problems that make a lot of money, solving little
Yeah.
problems, or even creating problems and solving those problems for money, as opposed to tackling the big issues. How
Yeah.
do we do that?
Yeah. Uh, so I I'm
It's a
thinking of my
bigger
dad.
question than the show.
It is, well, it is, but I think part of it is, we with those big issues, we feel like they're so overwhelming and like we don't have agency, right?
Hmm.
So we need to shift that thinking. So I will tell another story. I like stories. When I was in high school, my dad, who was a nuclear physicist, um, found out they were going to cancel AP physics, and was like, oh, well, if it was English, I could do nothing about it, but AP physics I can do. So he volunteer taught AP physics for 3 years in a row, because my sister was 1 year older than me. She was the first one who had him, then me. And then there were so many kids at the school whose brother or sister had him for AP physics, that they were like, we need to have him. So they
Yeah.
convinced him to go one more year, even without a child in the class. And he did not have a teaching credential. He was a PhD, nuclear physics, had worked for JPL, for various other, high level companies. So he brought in different elements to teaching. And one of them was, he started at the beginning of the year and said, you high school students are going to design, build, throw, and then create the calculus, the equation for the flight of a boomerang.
Wow.
Right?
Very cool.
Fascinating, right? Now, what he did not tell us until the end of the year was that nobody had yet been able to write an equation for the flight of a boomerang. Right?
It's like
So
unwinnable.
yeah,
I love it.
no, but the thing was, when he said that, he's like, you all didn't fail, like nobody figured it out, but nobody, PhDs have not been able to figure out how to do this. And one of you might have,
Yeah, wouldn't that have been
because
fantastic if somebody
yeah,
did?
yeah, it's like you didn't know that there's a limitation. You didn't know that there was a hard problem. So you all, like, I mean, and every one of us, we jumped in, we designed, like mine looked like an M because my name starts with M, like, why not? Whatever, right? I mean, my friends did all these weird things, right? And we had to do every aspect of it. We didn't know that it was an impossible problem,
Hmm.
right? And at some point, somebody will figure it out. So why not one of us, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we need more of that attitude, right? Because we come into these big problems and we say, oh, well, for hundreds of years, nobody has been able to figure this out. It's challenging. It's undoable, right? We're not going to be able, and we come in with all of that. And how different it would be if we said, here's a problem. Here's a game.
Yeah.
Like, which one of us could figure this out?
Yeah.
I think it would lead to some different results.
Yeah, I think the big issue is that we're still in our own way. We're looking at it and we're going, boy, that's a big problem. I don't want to start. I don't want to even start on that because it's so huge. But the only way to eat an elephant is a bite at a time, right? So
Right.
absolutely. Well, very
Yeah.
cool. So where do you think we're going? So it's time to think like a futurist. It's like the year 2033. It's 10 years from now. Do you think we've actually been able to sort of allow more creativity and innovation into our lives, or do you think we're closing down and going in the opposite direction? I mean, which way are we going?
Yeah. So I think we might still be in the midst of that struggle,
Hmm.
because I'm starting to see some of the research. I also am seeing a lot of pushback to it already right now. And I think in 10 years, there will still be that. There will be the people who are like, no, we can't let play into this. We need to be more serious about this. The situations, I think, will be even more dire in some areas. And that it will feel very stressful for leaders to say, like, we can bring joy into this too.
Hmm.
And I think, and I hope that there will be more leaders saying we need to bring joy into this, because why are we here on this world if we're not bringing joy to our interactions, if we're not engaging people with curiosity? And I think the increase of AI in different spaces is going to make the rote thinking, the making things happen the way it has always happened, that stuff will have become easier and automated, right?
Hmm.
If we want to do something the way it's been done in the past, like, have AI do it, because there's the reference and the history there that can be tapped into. What we need people to do is be creative, be innovative, come up with new ideas, to play with things, to see things in different ways, to put disciplines together. And I think there will be more of a demand for it and an urgency for it. I hope there will be leaders saying we can do this in this way, and it matters how we treat each other, and it matters what conditions and what environments we create. And this is how we are going to solve the really serious problems. And I think that tension will still be felt between the two.
Yeah, no, I
And
think
I
you're
and
absolutely
I
right.
hope, yeah,
A lot of the work that people are doing nowadays is kind of rote cogs in the machine sort of thing.
yeah,
That stuff AI should be doing, and the humans should be freed
yeah,
up to do things that humans can do. But there's still a lot of people who are sort of stuck in that. This is kind of
yeah,
I kind of like it. It's my 9 to 5. I don't have to think about it. But they are the ones who need to realize it's time. It's time to step up and use our creativity as a human being,
yeah,
as opposed to just doing that.
yeah, absolutely,
Well,
absolutely.
how do you get people to understand that and get out of it? Do they have to like lose their jobs and go, okay, now I must become a data scientist? Or
Oh, I hope
hopefully
not.
not.
I hope not. I think that we do need to decrease the fear,
Mhm.
because when we're in that mindset of a potential loss, right? I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to be able to do things the way I've done it in the past. I'm not going to be as useful or as valuable or as valued. Those, those are painful, right? So we need to find ways to reduce the fear. And I do think that that play can help there, because uh, when we shift our mindset from this is the way we've done it, and I feel comfortable and I feel valued and I feel contribute, to to that playful mindset of saying, all right, what if you didn't have to do that? What if you could do that faster? Right?
Mm,
Where's the gain in it? What if you could do that faster? What would you do with the extra 3 hours you got in your day? I'm
mhm.
like, huh. Right?
Watch more
What if you
Netflix?
were
No.
Yes, and there are days. um, but what could be imagined, right? If you could still do this, but you could do it in less time, right? And how do we make it less scary to learn something new? How do we make it less high risk, so lower stakes in being able to do something more efficiently, or being able to refocus from what we know we can do well, and what in some ways, like, people will always probably need to double check the work, or
Mhm.
do things in spot checking, do things that way. So much, some of those people very attentive to details, like, we need them, because there's going to be that element of it, but maybe they don't have to do quite as much, or spend quite as much time on it, right?
Yeah.
So what does that free up, right? And I think that we need the connection between people to make that happen as well, because if you're afraid of you losing your job, but I see something that I need your skills for, and can invite you into something, or even if I don't know, like my dad not knowing which one of us might solve the equation of the boomerang, right?
Mhm.
you know if I can invite more people in, then who knows what we might see together.
Yeah, because I have a feeling that a lot of people have the mindset that there's a job that they have to do, and then there's fun that they'd love to do, because they'd love
Yeah,
to be able to do more fun, but they can't make any money doing the fun. So if there was some way we
doing
could,
the fun stuff.
connect those two things, it's kind of like I might enjoy writing books, but if I can't make any money writing books, then I
Yeah,
can't really make a living. So how do we connect the
yeah.
creativity to the ability to get through life?
I love that question. And I think it is both an individual question and a structural question. What I mean by that is that individuals need to spend the time to know what they enjoy doing, right? Which we don't always do, right?
Mhm.
We have so much of a pathway through. And within that, to really drill down, I mean, like, the person who likes writing, do you like writing fiction or nonfiction? Do you like writing in any of its forms, whether it's an email to your boss, or a joke for a children's book, right? What does that really look like? Do you like the drafting and revising, or the first, publication that you get,
Mhm.
right? So where is it that you like it? I think that's an important part. But I also think that we need to look at, how do we structure our jobs? How do we structure our interactions with people, whether it's Zoom meetings or city hall meetings, or whatever
Yeah.
it is? Are we structuring those in ways that bring out the creativity of each person, that really leverage and elevate the strengths of each person and what is unique about them? Because I think that's part of where we feel more comfortable in bringing a bit of what we find as fun into the workplace, is when we feel like it's valued rather than judged, and that's important.
Right. Well, it's important to bring your entire self into the workplace, because I think that's what people used to have these work facades and home facades, and now those are all breaking down because the workplace is completely different from what it used to be.
Yeah. Well, and I would say sometimes it isn't necessarily our whole self. There are times when I
This
don't
is
want to
true.
bring
Sometimes, I don't know
all
if I
of
should
me.
tell my boss that.
um but it is a more authentic self, I think, that
Mhm.
we need to be attentive to. And I mean, we know when we're shutting down, we know when we're holding back, and those are opportunities, I think, for conversations around what's happening. And and for the leader, I think, when we're not getting the response that we want, or the engagement we want, those are opportunities to be really curious
Mhm.
around what's going on, and to look for, like, how can we make this space better so that our people can show up? Because I don't think we should put it on the backs of employees and say, oh, you need to just show up more authentically, you need to bring your whole self. No, like, the structure needs to invite that in.
Yeah.
And as leaders, I think there's a lot we can do to look at and reconsider the structures to make sure that we're really building our structures, coming back to design thinking, right? Building our structures in ways that are truly designed for the people.
Yeah. And I think another thing that you touched on was time, because a lot of times people think you can get immediate results. Like you bring a bunch of people into the room, you throw them together, and then boom, brainstorm a few things, and there you have something. And you're not going to get that day one. You're not going to get that even week one or month one. It takes time for teams to gel and come together. And sometimes they have to even go through conflict, but eventually it happens. But a lot of times it's almost like there's so much pressure to deliver quickly that we don't give things the proper amount of time to percolate.
Yes, I'm a big fan of thinking about our transitions, whether I'm structuring a workshop and thinking about the transitions between sessions or with a team. And I mean, I think we all recognize that moment when we recognize that COVID was here to stay for more than just a blip in interruption of a couple weeks. And the team that I was leading at that point had been planning a big in-person event with students and teachers, and schools are shutting down, workplaces are shutting down, all of this stuff is happening. It would have been really hard at that moment, even with the team that had gelled, to say, okay, like quick pivot, let's go ahead and start planning something different. We as a team, what we needed was time for a transition that included a sense of loss and recognizing that, a space for grief, because we had lost something that had been valued by the community, that had had good impact. And then with that time having been given, we were able to transition into a space of curiosity and creativity, and to build something that was so much better, involved more people, met a need at that point. And it seemed like most of the organization I worked for at that point was still struggling with, like, we need to be building, we need to be doing something, how are we doing this? By giving that space to have to experience the loss together, to grieve together, and to transition, we were able to actually move much faster than others in our own organization or in comparable organizations that were serving educators. And so when we think about, oh, this needs time, and some leaders will say, I don't have time, this is an urgent issue, we need to do something right away. I would counter that it is worth giving that time then, because it will allow the team to move faster when you need them to, and faster overall. That time that is human-centered, that is attentive to where each person is 100% worth it.
Yeah, and I love the focus on transitions, because that's where change occurs, and that's those are the things that we're most afraid of. Change is the thing we're most afraid of.
and yet we don't have to be, right? Like when we're kids, we're not always afraid of change. We're like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, this is cool.
What's a beach?
Exactly.
And I remember as the younger sister, I was always curious about what my older sister was doing and when can I do that, right? So you're right that so often we are afraid of change as adults. We have this mindset and we beat it into people of, oh, change is hard. Change does not have to be hard. It can be fun. Yeah. And we sometimes forget that as adults because we're worried about losing something. We're worried about losing our identity. We're worried about losing our lifestyle or the things that have become comfortable. And we don't have to be. That can be a mindset that we transition out of as well.
Exactly. I love it. Change is fun. That's the best.
Change is fun.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
My website is maryhendra.com, and that lets people know what I'm working on and how to play with me. And I am also very active on LinkedIn. So I love people joining in on the conversations on LinkedIn to just contribute thoughts and share thoughts and ask questions.
Excellent. Fantastic. I'll put all the information in the show notes. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can go direct. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Talk to you later.
You too.